because I have a little screen here, so we're not even on camera at the moment. We're just chilling here. We're just talking.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll share it on mine too.
All right. Very cool. All right. We are live here. I'm gonna take a drink of water.
Yeah. All right.
And if you want to, you can have the headphones on. You don't have to.
But I don't have to.
I wear them so that the people at home can make sure that they can at least hear my voice, or I can tell what they're hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you tell if?
Yep, you sound perfect.
Okay, got it.
I sound good. You sound good.
Lovely.
And like I said, if you're comfortable with or without them, it's up to you.
Yeah.
So, Aditya, thank you so much for being on today.
Mm-hmm.
We met a few weeks ago at 1 Million Cups as you were presenting a lot of the lean lab business that you're working with.
Yeah.
And before we jumped on here, we were talking about standardized testing and the wonders that it brings to us. So I was telling you about the different standardized testing I took when I was in public school, but you said it's now changed, and we've got is it a whole new set of standardized testing that we have now, or is it a combination of what used to be and now?
So so before I do this, let me preface by saying I am not really an expert on standardized tests. So I'm gonna talk about it from the lens of just my experience.
Okay,
I remember when I was in school, which was a while back. When I was going through school, I grew up in New Jersey, and I took maybe a standardized test, every 3-ish years, third grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade sort of deal, and it was just New Jersey tests, and then, the teachers talked about it, and that was sort of what it was. And then around that time, as well as I was sort of leaving the education system, there was a lot of talk about, or in the thick of middle school, high school, I think, there was a lot of talk about No Child Left Behind, right? And should we pass it or should we not pass it? This huge legislation that would then mandate, I was told that it would mandate that everyone would have to test every single year, and that there would be penalties for schools that were underperforming or failing, and so on and so forth.
And just to preface, No Child Left Behind was passed during George W. Bush in the early 2000s.
Yes.
And now that we sit here, I can't even. Was it passed?
Yes, it happened. So then I went to college. That completely didn't really affect me in my education.
Right. Same here.
Yeah. So I went through. I mean, it was sort of implemented, I would say, probably right after I graduated high school, or was starting to get implemented when I was a senior. But it didn't matter to me because I already sort of passed the old state test in junior year. And then when I went back, so I went to college, then I went to India for a year where I was born, and then came to Kansas City for the first time in 2012 as a Teach for America Corps member, and I was a teacher at East High School in Kansas City Public Schools.
Okay.
On the Missouri side. And I was a 7 through 12 math teacher, mostly to ELLs, or English language learners. So a lot of new immigrants and refugees to this country, but also mainstream students as well. And by that time, obviously, the testing experience was very, very different. It was clear that I kind of got a crash course in what was expected from state testing at the time. A lot of things were aligned to state tests. Teaching and testing was just incredibly, incredibly important. And from my personal experience as a teacher, we were all kind of just very obsessed with making sure that our kids got good scores.
And I think we all know the answer, but why is standardized testing, so important to all of these public schools?
Well, so again, from my viewpoint as a teacher, I was I can just tell you what I was sort of told. And it was when I was teaching in KCPS, it was unaccredited at the time. And so our scores really had a lot to do with whether we would get accredited or provisionally accredited. And funding was tied to that. And, I don't I can't really say that I know specifically people were bad things will happen if like we all like fail the standardized test. Like all of our kids fail the standardized test at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like the state will come and take over. There might be layoffs, like deep cuts in funding.
A lot of fear.
It was kind of anything and everything. Yeah, I don't know what actually would have happened because we ended up raising our scores a little bit when I was in there, and then we ended up getting provisional accreditation. But by that time, I was at the Lean Lab.
And was the time when you were in Kansas City Public Schools, was that around the time when there was the drama of people, administrators coming and going, getting cut, all of the stuff, the state taking over, losing accreditation? Was it before, during, or after?
That was during.
That was a dramatic time.
During, yeah, I came in right after, so I was in there 2012 through 2014.
Okay.
And so I came in right after, I would say the year after the districted right sizing, as I recall, when they shut down like half of the schools and like redid, like all of the high schools suddenly became 7 through 12 and all the elementaries became K6 and they shut down all the middle schools. So I sort of came in like right after all of that, and just like the there was like definite turnover. The previous superintendent, Covington, had just left, so I had Dr. Green as my superintendent.
Okay.
But that having been said, I mean, Mark Bedell is the current superintendent of Kansas City Public Schools, and I think he's my fourth, and I've only been in Kansas City for 5 years, I would say. So it was Green, then there was an interim, Altunis, and then there was Covington.
Okay.
But when I was planning to move to Kansas City, I was told that Bedell is now, and then I was told that Covington would be my superintendent, but then he like left by the time I'd moved. So anyway, so that was all I think. So
okay, so then you joined on to Lean Lab, and that's what when we met a few weeks ago, that's it really piqued my interest because I didn't realize Lean Lab, now correct me where I'm wrong, Lean Lab is basically an incubator, business incubator, startup incubator here in Kansas City for people who want to implement and try new ideas on how to educate the youth across America.
Yes, basically. That's really good.
Yeah. All right.
So we are a Kansas City-based startup incubator, and we invest in and support early-stage education entrepreneurs. So basically, what does that mean? Because I find that might not be the most accessible language to everyone.
Sure.
Especially in my role as someone who works deep within the community. Basically, if you have an idea to start a business that solves a problem that you see in schools, you would come to us and we would help you get that business off the ground. So we invest. So our core program is our fellowship, which is now currently running. It's running from August to November. We're in our 4th cohort, so we've been doing this for 4 years. And we're a startup ourselves, so we're a pretty lean organization. But we are growing and hiring.
What kind of help do you need for anybody?
Oh yeah, quick plug. We are looking for someone to support in our coaching and curriculum for our entrepreneurs. So ideally someone who has education startup experience and has run an education startup for about 5-ish years, let's say. Someone a little later than who we invest in. Someone with deep knowledge of entrepreneurship and education to help build out our curriculum and coach all of our own entrepreneurs. And the second thing is we're looking for sort of an associate who would help us with development.
Okay. Now, what really caught my eye is that I didn't realize, and this is a few questions I've been asking you, is how much change can you really have when you've got a group of people up in Washington, D.C. who are kind of writing the policy, writing the guidance for how students across the country will have to learn. Like you said, No Child Left Behind. We were talking about Common Core earlier.
Yeah.
What type of success rate and what type of positive feedback have you seen from, say, legislatures, administrators, and like we said, DESE, Department of Elementary, Secondary, or even on Capitol Hill? I'm not sure if you made it far enough up to Washington, D.C. or not.
I think.
But
so I would say so. It's interesting because. I've never done education policy work, even though I think I just sort of, as a layman, keep up on it because it just has such an obvious impact in my life as a teacher and then subsequently now supporting education entrepreneurs. It's interesting. Education entrepreneurs really do sort of brush up against policy often or the effects of policy, right? Because one thing that every successful business needs is is a revenue stream. And, if you're going to provide a service, eventually someone's going to have to pay you for that service, right? And so policymakers do have a great deal of power in deciding, when they give out grants or when they mandate, like districts should be held accountable to this or schools should be held accountable to this, that like opens the door for entrepreneurs to step in and provide services for that, right? And so, policymakers have that, like, do have the power to incentivize the creation of certain services over others. So I would say one thing that I've been thinking about sort of recently, so this is just like Aditya is sort of just thinking about this recently and like has no, and just, maybe I'll think of something a bit more finalized as I sort of keep doing this work. But, huge education companies, for example, like one thing that they do pretty well, or like the big ones tend to do pretty well, is they write and administer, they either make tests, right, or they do back-end data analysis, right? So if you're like a huge education company, right, and are raking in like millions or billions of revenue, right, like you kind of tend to do like both of those things.
Sure.
And why do you do that? Because in this country we have to test all of our kids every single year. So that means that our governments and schools have opened the door for, essentially for like a service provider to come in and provide that service. Like I will make the test for you, right? Because you can't have every single elementary school making a standardized test in-house and then implementing it. It doesn't really make sense that way.
Okay.
So there's that. And also consequently, because now we test every single year, we need to look at all of that data efficiently and make decisions as to what we do as teachers in the classroom or as districts and what we incentivize, what we prioritize in terms of learning and learning standards, right?
So then at the Lean Lab, when you guys are also mentoring these different education startups who are trying to change the world of education, did you say you're also doing data then analysis, or not yet? But this is what you think in the future you'd like to try to pick up and incorporate.
I think so. What we do, we have a very, very strong mission focus. So our core values are human-centered design, equity. And that's like a really, really big one for us, and boldness, right? So we are really looking for entrepreneurs who are solving deep problems in education and trying to make education more equitable, right? Okay. So to close achievement gaps or working in under-resourced communities. So if we look at our current cohort of fellows, right? Like one of them is Diversity Talks, right? A entrepreneur out of Providence who would like to bring a service to Kansas City where students lead diversity, equity, professional development for teachers, right? And really giving students the voice to talk about their experiences and bridge the gap between their teachers and themselves. So that's like very far from like the world of testing and data analysis. So then you're saying that it's basically a concept to improve communication between the students and the teachers so the teachers can reflect better on what the students are excelling at. Be better at teaching, right? I mean, there's something about, you can't teach without really building a relationship with your students, right? What kind of feedback is she getting on that? How's that coming along? So that's coming along pretty well. She has been able to partner with one school in Kansas City, and she's going to be able to partner with another school pretty soon. Okay. And she also presented at the Mayor's Suspension Summit, did like a sort of a workshop that was student-led for a bunch of administrators and educators who were at the Suspension Summit. Okay, so, very nice. Yeah, so that's really exciting. But before we... that is actually reminding me, and I know I've said it quite a few on past episodes, so people that listen every time are going to be rolling their eyes. This sounds a lot like a documentary that I've seen called, I think it's The Happiest Children on Earth. Do you know this one? I don't know that one. But tell me more about it. Yeah. It's a documentary about children in Japan. In their fourth grade, they do all the normal all the normal courses, but they have a focus on emotional, like acknowledging your emotions. So not only are the students doing all the normal day-to-day stuff, but from day one of fourth grade all the way to the end, every day they're writing out about their emotions, their feelings, back and forth between them and the teacher.
at certain points, if the children have the normal situations where maybe they get in a schoolyard fight, then it's like a classroom involved thing where the class all back and forth, they react, understand how their emotions are, how to react to their emotions, how to identify like their envy, their jealousy, their hatred, that kind of stuff. And by the end of the first year, they go on to 5th grade and do whatever.
Yeah.
But after the 4th grade, it's shocking. The documentary follows them in their first, and they look like a lot like you and I probably did in elementary school. But by the end of this, they look as mature as you would expect someone who's in their 20s or so emotionally to be about this. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of similar to what she's doing. Where she's, I don't know the specifics, but they're giving feedback between themselves and the teacher and their peers in the classroom. So if she has half the success they did.
Really, I mean, one of the things. I agree. I think that one of the things that we did before we decided to even recruit for this fellowship this time around was try and get as much community voice as possible in what the problems were that people were feeling in their schools, so that way we could recruit entrepreneurs much more strategically to solve those problems. So I went out and did a listening tour of 134 parents, students, teachers, educators, and community leaders within the Kansas City area to really find out what their vision for Kansas City education was.
That sounds actually really interesting to see what you hear.
Yeah, so it was a lot, and I learned a lot. But I'm going to do it again next year. I would like to do it every single year, to inform our strategy going forward for the fellowship. But I think so. Things that I learned. Number one, parents are across the board pretty unhappy with the state of communication between them and their education institution that they send their children to. So
sure, of course.
And this can take a myriad of forms, but it's like I'm overwhelmed, or I get no information, or I want academic information, or I want emotional information, I want to know how my kid's feeling, or whatever. So there's just a lot of stuff right there, right?
Yes.
Parents are just not happy with the state of communication. Educators, I would say those who work in schools, feel very siloed. So there's a lot of, I don't know what's happening in the classroom next to me, much less what's happening in the building, much less what's happening in any other building.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And then students, which diversity talks really helps, is students are we really just kind of spend all day doing worksheets, because it's test prep, right?
Wow.
So we really want real world learning opportunities, right? Which is why one of our other fellows is named Explorable Places, and she helps. It's a website that helps teachers find and book field trips and real world learning opportunities. So it's we want to get out of the classroom. We want to talk more. We would like leadership opportunities, right? We just sort of feel like school is about us sitting down and just memorizing facts. And we would like to stand up and tell teachers about our experiences.
And what school district were you doing the surveys in? Because I hear this across the.
Yeah, it was across the board. So I prioritized. So I basically took I took a report from IFF, which used to stand for something and now stands for nothing, I think.
Okay.
But they published a report about sort of high needs zip codes and published a huge report and broke it down by zip codes and what zip codes were the highest need for education in schools. And so I basically did a thing where I did it by zip codes. So I focused 50% on high need zip codes and then 50% on non-high need zip codes.
Okay.
So I could just have a swath. So so I spoke to a bunch of people, parents, students, and teachers and community leaders from both the urban core, the high need zip codes, from wealthy suburban zip codes.
And so then being that you've got such a varied pool you're surveying from, and you found similar results across the board.
Yeah. In parents for sure. I will definitely say.
So that's concerning. That's concerning because everybody seems to think, the inner city schools aren't so good, and we want to get out to the suburban schools. But it sounds like the suburban schools, although they've got nicer instruments and better sports teams and maybe more science classes.
I would also say, great. They are providing great educations, right?
Yeah.
But then it's again, it's not it's perfect everywhere, right? I would say that, I think that, whether you are, even if you're a teacher in a high performing school, right? The issue of feeling siloed, right? That you're kind of just achieving in a bubble, and you kind of want to connect to the broader community, right, of educators and parents. Like that is an issue that's independent of like the achievement of your students, kind of, right? You can be a great teacher, and a lot of great teachers are really good. They just feel like they're not connected to a broader community.
Okay.
And that sort of makes sense. I mean, you know, like from my personal experience as a teacher, you are sort of in your classroom and you have like students like coming in and out every single day. It's not like I have like, it's not like, you know, I'm in an office and I can like have the flexibility to like grab coffee with someone and then go and do my work or set up a meeting or something. You know, like you have to be in the room when there are children in the room.
Of course.
You know? So like, so there's that. Yeah, and I think, and parents are a vast and diverse group of people, you know, who care deeply about their kids, and no matter where you are leaving your children alone with other adults for 8 hours of the day. So then
where children and students, the students I should say, and the parents both feel that there's shortcomings, would you associate that more with the district, the state, or the federal Department of Education, State Department of Education, or the district? Where does more of the disconnect come in?
I don't think of it in those terms. I'm going to reframe this.
Sure.
I don't really think of it in those terms. I don't think, you know, our education system has a lot of problems, right? And we at the Lean Lab are very open about the fact that like there are tremendous education inequities that like, you know, we really need to like change how things are going, right? And the problem is that there's just a breakdown at every level. You don't really have a systemic problem if there isn't like a problem at every single level within the system.
Fair enough.
Right? And so like, yes,
a little bit of blame goes all around.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, is blame even really the right way to think about it? I mean, you think like, sure, I mean, you know, like some people like you're like, you could be a much better actor in the life of students than you should or can or whatever, you know, but that's, I mean, I find that to be pretty rare. I mean, I think that for me, it was just much more of, you know, like you have these constraints placed upon you and you act as best as you can within the constraints.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, I mean, that's just, and the system is very dense, right? And it's also very localized. So here it's very localized. I mean, the fractured nature of our landscape goes from individual teachers like all the way up to the city as a whole. I mean, we are split in the middle by a state line, which like definitely doesn't help with the connection aspect.
Yeah,
and, you know, on top of that, even on the Missouri side, there's like, you know, like 15 public school districts for a size of city that we are, and like over 20 charters, you know, and that's like a lot of different schools and school districts.
There actually are quite a few charter schools in Kansas City, given the size of how you know, not huge we are.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are a lot of schools in Kansas City. I mean, there's a lot of different districts in Kansas City, given how not huge we are, right? Like, if you were to compare us to, let's say, like Chicago or something, you know, like Chicago has like Chicago Public Schools, and that's like a huge school district, and it kind of covers most of the city. And also it's super centralized because like the mayor like runs the schools, right? Whereas like
but
here,
Chicago's
like,
such a bad example.
Right.
Nothing is working in Chicago.
Well, yes, but I mean, so it's like you have like a system like us, which is very decentralized.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Because like for us, like, you know, it's not like the city has any power in the schools. They're all administered by local school boards, right? Yes. And then you have Chicago, which is like super centralized, you know, and you're like, okay, you know, I mean, it's a dense thing. And I think for us, you know, as supporters of early stage education entrepreneurs, like, you know, it's just like we have a framework and we work within it to, you know, really try and push people to do equitable work.
Yeah. No. So who are some of the other the cohorts you have in this right now in this class?
Yeah. We've got Diversity Talks, which I already talked about. Explorable Places, which is helps teachers find and book field trips very quickly and easily. So that was a pretty easy one for us, just because we were like, hey, real world learning opportunities, get kids out of the classroom as much as you can. Then we have Healthy Hip Hop, which is a local KC team. It is basically, so he's transitioning into he wants to transition to an ed tech platform, but they create brain breaks to get kids up and moving, but it's using like hip hop beats but with like healthy positive lyrics. And graduate of KCPS or product of KCPS. The fourth one is Transportant, which basically is working to try and fix issues of transportation and busing to and from school.
Okay.
Really trying to get like units on buses to collect data to then communicate to administrators and parents about like whether the child got on the bus, whether the bus was on time, and so on and so forth. And that's like a hairy and very dense and thorny mess, which I don't think most people really know. If you don't actually like work in a school, I don't think you really have an idea of just how messed up school transportation is.
Well, how so? I know aside from like the school bus maybe being late or missing.
It's a mess. It's just a mess. I mean, it's like it's like you have like buses don't show up or their routes are not very efficient, and so they show up late or they like go to the wrong place and they're very expensive, there's a lot of issues there. I mean, it's even just efficiency, like is a huge problem. Like, I had students who were like waking up like 1.5 hours earlier to ride the bus for like an hour to come to school, like one way. And that's quite a lot. Yeah. I also think within the context of like families, like if you have, it's hard. I mean, it's hard if you end up having to go to work before your child's bus comes, right? Like, and the bus doesn't show up. Like, what is the child supposed to do? You're at work. Do you then leave work? You do. You then leave work, go home.
That's a good point.
It's like,
yeah, a lot of parents are obviously working during the day.
Yeah.
And so you have to sometimes cut your schedule around when that bus schedule then is, right? Yeah. Or school for that matter.
Yeah. And there's a fourth one. The fourth one. I always do this. I list 4 and then I forget the 5th, and it changes every single time. It is. Yes, it is vital. So this is So it basically it's they help make materials more accessible to students in the classroom by basically using your class set of iPads that you already have. You as a teacher can just modify like whatever images you're using or text so that if a student runs their finger over it, it either vibrates or makes a sound or is read out loud for anyone who needs help processing text like non-visually.
Okay.
So like blind, visually impaired students with dyslexia, any other special education student who like needs just like more feedback in order to understand like what's going on.
And did I hear you say on classroom iPads?
Yeah. So
how many classes have iPads right now?
It depends. It depends on the school and the district. There's this term called one-to-one where like if you're a school one-to-one, that means like every kid has a device, whether it's like a Chromebook or an iPad or maybe a laptop. And some like, have like class sets, like they have like a class set in every classroom.
Is that starting to take over right now? Getting Chromebooks and iPads in class and stuff. Man, if I didn't have a distraction enough already, I imagine having an iPad or a Chromebook right in front of me is not going to help. I guess what can you lock them down or lock out the game Angry Birds and stuff during class?
Yeah, I mean, I find like I think using technology in the classroom for me, like it's like the same limitation that you have anywhere. Like if a student's not interested in your lesson, they're not going to be interested whether there's a computer or not, So yeah, I find it to be kind of like a net neutral, but I also really like the potential of technology in the classroom.
What about some of the cohorts from your past 3 years? Are any of them still around? They're still implementing their work? Yeah.
We have a 67% persistence rate. So a lot of our fellows are still working on their ventures, like a 67% persistence rate. So we have a lot of our fellows are still working on their ventures. We take 5 a year. Basically, we take like 5 ventures a year. And so we've done that for 4 years. So we're like about to do like 20.
Very good.
So a lot of them kept on doing that. I think it was interesting. The first year, which I was a part of, I was like the first like very pilot year. It was all teachers in the classroom education stage. Idea stage, right? So like we were just teachers in the classroom and we had a summer and we just came in with an idea, right? And just tried to build it out. And a lot of those ventures, they might a lot of those like were not really up and running anymore. I mean, one of them still is, but everyone else in that cohort has gone on to be leaders in the classroom, leaders in the community in other ways, or to start other ventures, right? So Connor Nowak, who is one of our alum, who was in it with me, he started an ed tech product that didn't pan out, but now he is the founder of a nonprofit called the Pell Project, which you can donate to, and they offer Pell grants, or like they offer scholarships to undocumented students, the equivalent of a Pell Grant. Because in the state of Missouri, they're not eligible.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I imagine they probably can't sign up for that same stuff. Makes sense.
And this is a perfect example of how like policymakers pass policy and then they create needs that are then filled by entrepreneurs, right? So, you know, the Missouri, in Jeff City, they decided that undocumented students would count as international students and would have to pay the highest rate of tuition, and were also ineligible for any Pell Grants. And so consequently, in response to that policy that was created, Connor Nowak decided to create a nonprofit to fill in that gap.
Now that's a pretty hot topic right now, the whole immigration situation. Clearly, you can't get away from it. Like, it doesn't matter where you're, TV, news, radio, whatever, everybody's talking about it. How do these immigrants that, like you said, undocumented, illegal, whatever, how are they getting through the public school system? Because you're right, once you're here, go to school, let them learn, let them become productive members somehow. But like you said, if you're undocumented, you don't have the legal papers or whatever to get the same benefits. How's everyone working in that instance there with that situation?
I mean, in terms of like your K-12, like you go to school, right? Like we're not like checking IDs.
Yeah, it's not like they ask for those papers at the front door.
Yeah, it's not like you're going through like airport security to get to schools. Although there are metal detectors in some schools.
Right.
But
unfortunately, gosh.
Yes. So, you know, I think that for a lot of my former students who were undocumented and you know, told me so, I don't know how many of my students were actually undocumented. I taught quite a few immigrant refugee students.
Yeah.
I knew at least if they were considered a refugee, they legally entered the U.S. because refugee is like a legal status. So everyone else who was just an immigrant who wasn't classified as like a refugee resettlement, I don't know whether they were documented or undocumented. And some of them told me and some of them didn't. But I, as a classroom teacher, had to deal with the effects of that because, you know, they lived like within fear of being deported, right? Or their parents being deported, or their parents would be deported and then they had to move, you know, to like live with someone else. And then they might be not in my classroom, or like they would come into my classroom at the middle of the year, like it promoted student mobility. It's just a very big destabilizing force. And if you don't have stability, it's very hard to excel at school.
You know, I imagine the combination of that instability mixed with the boredom of maybe just doing worksheets and stuff, that's got to really hamper the potentially great education these kids could be receiving.
Yeah.
That's why I think what you guys are doing at Lean Lab is awesome. It's just it's not enough to just sit there and let the expect that the schools are just going to fix themselves or these problems. Even PTA. I mean, is there even a PTA for say like KCPS?
Yeah, it depends on the school. Yes, first of all, there is I think it's called. So I know a bunch of parents who are on DAC, which is called the District Advisory Committee.
Is that I guess similar to the PTA?
So they do. They are a bunch of parents who are involved at like a district level, and then depending on the school, you know, some schools have very active PTAs, some schools don't. So it kind of depends. Again, you'll sort of like, if you ask me, like if anyone asks me any questions about like status of schools, I'll be like, it depends on the school. So you'll hear that a lot, but it does sort of depend. And I think that, you know, I think that anytime that you're working to sort of push a system, right? Like to be better, right? You need one of three things. It's kind of like a three-legged stool. So you have community organizing on one end, right? Like people who sort of try and like get the community to be empowered to vote in a certain way or to take a collective action in a certain way. Then you have policy. You have to have good policy that are the players within the system making good decisions, you know, so that means like teachers who are actually policymakers in their own right, you know, because they make decisions about student experiences in the classroom, right? Like teachers make good decisions and principals make good decisions and the administration at central offices make good decisions and the lawmakers make good decisions. Those people who work within the system, right, make good policy. And then the third is you need new solutions that replace the antiquated or ineffective or unequal processes that we have right now. And that's sort of where we see ourselves at the Lean Lab, as like really partnering with the community and partnering with policymakers and trying to create new solutions to solve either new problems or to try and replace old practices.
In the years that you've been working with Lean Lab, what do you say is the biggest influence or the biggest impact you've made on the city so far with the different educational endeavors you've helped?
Oh God,
I imagine there's got to be.
That is really hard. I think I think so. First of all, I would say so. I'm going to give you like I don't know, like an imperfect answer, which is also just like a verb tense joke because it's. I'm going to give you an answer that points to what we've already accomplished and where we like hope to go. So we're a pretty young organization. So, we're always growing, and there are things that are coming on the horizon that I'm very excited about, and things that we've accomplished that I'm very excited about. So, accomplished that I'm very excited about. I'm really, really excited about the community that we've built and the leadership that we've incubated. And within like this past cohort, having fellows who sort of like stay on and really grow their companies to grow their impact, right? So we have been able to convene about like a little less, I think, than 1,500 people since we started from all across the metro. I mean, when I say like all across the metro, shockingly diverse, like very, very diverse community. Like, you have educators of all swaths from every single district and school, from at all levels, right? Like community members, parents, whatever. So getting all of them together to talk about innovation in the field of education. So we've managed to just convene quite a few people and really build that community. And we've worked with some of the best like sort of leaders that are coming up in the KC region. So like one fellow, another former fellow whose like venture didn't work out. Her name was Kirsten Brown. She wanted to start K-Core, which is a sort of like a mentoring group for administrators who feel very siloed. But now she is opening up and running the first year of the Crossroads High School. And so she's like,
oh, I don't know anything about this. What's going on with the Crossroads High School?
So the Crossroads schools, Crossroads Academies, as they're called, they are sort of like a system of charter schools. They have an elementary, they have an elementary and a middle, in the Crossroads, and they're a charter school, and then they also now have a high school. So they're sort of opening classes, like going up 9th grade, so on and so forth.
Okay.
So they have a 9th grade currently. So next year they'll have a 10th grade and 11th.
And where are they pulling these students from? Because I know a couple of the other charter schools in town have like a lottery. And you have to be in like a certain zip code or something. Is it similar?
Yeah. I mean,
deal?
so so it depends. It depends on the school.
It depends.
Ryan.
There you go. It depends.
It really depends.
Yeah, right.
So certain schools like, are zoned specifically to pull from a very specific set of zip codes or neighborhoods. Some schools pull from all over the city, but prioritize certain areas. I know Crossroads, just from being there and from the administration, they really work on trying to be an integrated, diverse school. So really trying to have both like white students and African-American students from all across the city, like in one school.
Okay.
And like, just being very diverse. So that's sort of their big thing. So they, I think, pull from everywhere, but I don't know the ins and outs of like where they prioritize and where they don't.
Of course,
and,
the internal workings.
I mean, I would love to if anyone from Crossroads wants to tell me, but
Yeah, well, hey, you've got a connection there now.
Yeah.
You say that she's running the entire.
Yeah, she's the founding principal.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your opinion or where you're setting, how you see the differences in the charter schools that we have here, like the Crossroads. There's University Academy. There's
I have a friend there.
I'm blanking off the one right off 63rd Street. Kaufman School.
Yes,
Kaufman
that's right.
School.
Oh,
I was
goodness.
blanking
my
thinking.
God.
I've driven by it a million times.
Yes, that's right.
So
I have so many
so
friends there. They're not going to be happy.
Why?
That I didn't say Coffin School.
Oh yeah. No, we got it.
Yeah.
We got
Okay.
it.
Yes.
From where you're standing, you've worked in the Kansas City Public School District. You work with Lean Lab now, and you definitely have your feelers in the city's education system, private, public. Where do you see where maybe the private charter schools are excelling, and maybe the public schools could pick up some of that, because it's no secret the public schools have had a lot of drama over the last few years about just not providing quality education.
Yeah.
So from where you're standing, where do you see some of these awesome achievements these private charter schools are pulling up?
Yeah. So. Okay. So this is a relatively thorny topic. I try not to really. So I try not to really see a difference between the public and the charter, and also a lot of charters are also public. And they're not private.
Okay, yeah.
So you'll have to definitional.
You have to school us here,
right?
Because I don't know.
Yes. So basically, I mean, a lot of charter schools are public in the sense that they take they're funded publicly, and they also have to have like equitable lotteries and things like that, and so most of the charters that you think of like operate in that way.
Okay.
And then so basically for me, I actually think of charters and public schools as very, very much the same, just because they're really great public schools and they're really great charter schools, and then there's like really bad ones and in both sides, right? And to me, like it just, like again, it's just sort of like from my vantage point, it just depends on the school. Like there are some charter schools that that are just as bad as like what you might imagine in popular imagination as like a failing public school, right? But like at the same time, when I was at East, yes, there were problems, but I also met some of the best teachers at East, and I know some of the best teachers there, and there's a lot of great stuff going on there. For example, Andrew Killen, a teacher there who's starting a really great agricultural program, which I'm like really excited about and would like to learn more about. But he is trying to revamp that agriculture program where, basically pulled together a ton of grants, right? And worked very closely with the district. And, they have 2 greenhouses there, really learning about, planning to learn population genetics through fisheries, right? Because fish reproduce quickly and you can actually observe them. They have a huge compost pile where a lot of the food waste from the school can then be composted to then grow plants, which can then go to feed the community and the students, right? They planted an orchard there, which can produce like a ludicrous amount of fruit that can then go to the local community.
Is this the same guy that created that? It's like East of Troost. He took a few blocks, a few plots, and just cleared them out and built a aquaponics farm. And he's having kids from around the city come and work.
No, but I think
is that
he
different?
partners with that guy because there is aquaponics thing at East High School going on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like really amazing and cool.
Very
cool.
It's
absolutely amazing and cool. Very real world learning, really rigorous, right? Also like things that like quite frankly we should all know because like no one understands how an ecosystem works and that's why we're like destroying our planet. But like, like really
or where our food comes from.
Yeah, or where
it comes
our food
off that
comes from.
semi truck.
And that's like East High School and KCPS, which quite frankly, when I say I used to teach at East High School and KCPS, people were like, were you worried for your personal safety?
Right. Well, you said there were metal detectors, which should be a genuine next question.
Right, which I just was like, that's a dumb question, and the answer is no, And so, no. And then, I think of really great. I mean, I think of a lot of my friends who teach at the Kaufman School or at University Academy or at Crossroads, and the work that they're doing, and Hogan. There's like such a great parent organizer out of Hogan, and. So there's, I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that people try and talk about blanket statements. And you just really, you cannot do it. You just can't do it. And I don't.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a fair point. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. Even right now, I'm speaking in an absolute, but speaking in absolutes almost never pan out. There's always the outliers.
Yeah. So. I mean, and it's not even like, outliers. I mean, to me, like when I think about charter versus public, for me, that's that's a relatively wonky policy problem, where I'm like, so we have this like new school structure and how does that affect funding? And, that's like very much to like reform that and how that works, because like the system like doesn't work perfectly.
So
right?
describe the
So,
differences between funding then, because I guess I'm not. You would probably have a much better idea maybe than funding between public and these charter schools.
No, I have like a very
No,
low
okay.
idea of funding.
Okay,
no, so
no,
we actually
go-
did a happy hour once where we invited Mike McShane, who's on our board.
Mike
and does-
McShane's a very smart guy. He's got a lot
Yes.
of good work he puts out.
Yes, to talk about school funding and how that
Okay.
works, and he literally just came in with like this huge packet
Yeah.
and was like, "Yeah, let me try to explain school funding." And then I read through it and I'm like, "Okay, this is cool." But it's just basically, I mean, it's there's like an algorithm equation, and then like each students get weighted differently based on various characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
and then therefore like schools tend to think of what's called per pupil. So it's like each student brings in this much money,
Mm-hmm.
and so so that affects everyone, right? Public and charter. So they're very assiduous about like they want to try and like get students and maintain them. Because it affects the money. Because every time a student leaves,
Absolutely, it affects the money.
You lose that money that came with that student. And
Well, but
that,
isn't that kind of also a good thing to incentivize, a little competition among the schools? If this school district starts to fail at this and fails at that and fails at that, and students start leaving for better school districts, it then incentivizes that failing school district to clearly get better or go out of business and be absorbed.
Yeah, I would say like to most of those things, I would say yes in theory.
Okay.
And like in practice, the way that we do that doesn't really work out at all. So I, to me, inherently education is a public system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And its job is to create the next generation of effective U.S. citizens.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And it does that for a very public reason, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't really do it for profit, and it doesn't do it for anything other than that, right? And so, I think that like from like the business community, there's a lot we can learn about efficiency, and there's a lot that we can learn about implementation, perhaps, right? But I think we think at the Lean Lab like very critically about our place in the ecosystem and how we might like affect it and not affect it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, I think that yes, like I think that like parents like should be and students should be able to move to schools that serve them and that they're happy about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I will also tell you that the dynamics of that on just like a citywide scale are very unequal, and also that like shutting, like I know the destruction that happens when you shut down a school, and
Okay.
that's like really bad, right? Like think about. And that's something that I feel like a lot of people like might not have ever experienced. Like I would sort of think about like, oh, what if I was like a junior in high school and was like very excited, like had like my community there and all that kinds of stuff. And like, like I think back to my high school experience, which I loved, strangely enough. And like what happens if that got shut down, like after my third year there, right? Because it was considered whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would say like, yeah, I mean, I think that I tend to think of things a bit differently. And we also like when I look for our ventures, right? Like who are we going to support and who are we going to invest in,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Like again, there is always just the work of really trying to we think very much about are you helping someone at the expense of others,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or are you, again, like why we have equity, are you working equitably, right? Like can this work in a can this work in a charter and a public and a diverse school as versus a very non-diverse school of whatever type, right? So on and so forth. So
Okay.
yeah.
What's the reaction been like from the community of schools? Have you got? I know that some of your cohorts, present and past, have gotten involved with other schools in the metro area. How's it been so far? Are they pretty receptive? Are they open to trying new ideas?
Yeah.
Or do you get a lot of pushback, like, well, you know what, we need a request for proposal, and maybe wait till next school year, and then we'll run it by this board, and we'll have this committee.
Yeah.
What's that like? I imagine when you guys come in with like a lot of energy and new ideas, like, we really think we can help you here with planning new field trips and giving you a variety to choose from, this whole database, and like, let me take it back to the committee. I'm just curious what type of reception you get in the education community.
Right. So I was
What's
so
so
this is
funny?
one of the, okay, so this because it depends on the school, Ryan. No, so no. That was
Yes, no, it does. That's the right answer.
Right. So, but so here's like yes. So I would say we've gotten both, right? But I would say that I've often felt very welcome at schools just because there is such a commitment to equity, right? Like the idea is that you have to tell us if this does not serve you, because then we will change to make sure that we can like serve the school, right? Like it's community first, right? And there are a lot of processes. So this sort of goes into, remember when you asked me like, what are you proud of, right? This is sort of like what I'm very excited about.
Okay.
We try and mitigate that, right? Because you can't always just have like, there are people, right? So people talk about like early adopters, right? Like there are people who are early adopters who are just like really are going to try something new. And some people will not try everything new all the time, and quite rightfully so, because they're doing things that work, and they, like why fix things that aren't broken? And so what we do is that we really try and put community first. So why did I do this listening tour, right? Because I should be recruiting entrepreneurs who are solving problems that the community has already said that they need solved, right? Then we bring in a lot of our stakeholders into our selection process, right? So that way, even the fellows that are accepted, right? Like we had a selection panel of community members who made the final selection, right? And so like those 5, like were the top 5 from that, and that way like there's already like acceptance that they're there. And then we have a community investment group. So like our funding, so we invest up to $35K in each of the ventures. So the the top 2 teams in our fellowship out of the 5 will get $25K each, right?
Okay.
And there is a community investment group that decides who gets that money, right? So it consists of a parent, a student, a teacher, a community leader, a nonprofit funder, and a for-profit investor. So bringing the community and the funding community also just, together at an equal playing field to make decisions. And so that way we hope that, like the top 2 teams that get that money that can really accelerate that growth are, again, the ones that have the imprimatur, or like the stamp of approval from the community, right? And so we do all of these things, to mitigate that effect, right? And I think that's what honestly every single organization really should be doing, because quite frankly, like if people are just like, no, I don't really want this, or like they're trying to give you the runaround, it's like, listen to them, like they are principals in the building, they are the board members, like what do they really want and what do they really need, and are you solving a problem for them in reality? And look at your organization and see the processes of your org, and can you actually like mitigate that by like building in community voice at every single step of the way?
Yeah, right? It doesn't make sense to solve a problem to give an answer to a problem that's not there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
So this year, I would say, having implemented sort of implementing that whole community-based process the whole time, it has really helped us. I mean, a lot of, like we have a lot, for the example that you did with Meg Davis of Explorable Places and the field trips, right? Like she was like, it's actually really funny because like I like emailed the school leader and they were just like, oh, we're so happy you made it in the fellowship. We were gunning for you, right? So like there's like, yeah, like, yes, I will meet with you. Like, of course, they're like, or she's like, yeah, I like going to these, like I'm like going to these like gatherings and people are like, oh yeah, like we've heard of you. Yeah, we were kind of gunning for you there, And so like, so that she's just like, wow, like there's like, I feel kind of already accepted, even though I've kind of been here for a week somehow, because you guys have just like involved so many people in like getting me here, That's
really cool that you guys at the Lean Lab are doing all of the best you can to make as frictionless as possible. You've already got the community, you've got the family, you've got the education folks who already kind of have, not all of them obviously, but enough that have an idea of what's coming down the pipe. Yeah. That when they get that phone call, like, oh yeah, okay, come on in, let's set up that meeting. Yeah. Okay, so are you familiar with Donors Choose? So that's one of my favorite charities out there, because that just directly cuts out all the middlemen. It goes right to the teacher who is directly involved with the student. Do you guys do any type of work with them, or are there any ideas that you've come by that are, like I said, cutting out everything but just helping the teacher directly?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Actually, the answer is yes. Last cohort, we incubated one of our most successful ventures named Pledge Sense. Yeah. They were part of our fellowship. So Pledge Sense is like a Donor's Choose. You can donate directly
I'm going to pull it up while we're talking.
Yes. You can donate directly to a teacher's classroom. So, and it's called Pledge, as in Pledge, Sense, CENTS.
Okay.
as in the penny, .com, and you can go to pledgesense.com and donate now. So the way that they work, they're actually different from Donors Choose. So they, whoa.
Put that on the TV there for you.
Exactly. So they're different from Donors Choose in the sense that you donate. So you are, instead of donating directly to an individual teacher, you can actually donate to, your money goes to a school, which means one of two things. Number one, so if you donate to Donors Choose, because it goes to an individual teacher, that counts as taxable income for the teacher.
Yeah. Oh, you know? Wait, say that again?
Yeah. Yes.
Does Donors Choose count as like taxable income to the teacher?
For a teacher, yeah. Like if you were to, if I was a teacher and I raised like $5,000 through Donors Choose, that would be like $5,000 of taxable income because it goes into my personal bank account.
I never. Okay. That's just a part of the deal.
Right. So, but Pledge Sense, because it goes to the school bookkeeper who then gives it to the teacher, means that you actually, it doesn't count as personal income for the teacher. And you get a letter that makes it a tax deductible donation for you as the donor.
Oh my gosh. We've got to get on this. We've got to boost this.
I know, right? Like, who knows? And see, like, another reason why policymakers create policies that open doors to incentivize certain businesses to operate, right? So like,
I know exactly what you
fun
mean.
fact. So you know, I mean, are we in the business of changing tax law? Not really, but Pledge Sense is doing great.
Yeah. Heck yeah. You know, it's really cool that you do this because it's so frustrating. I know a guy here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
His business is grocery. He runs a few grocery stores. You would know the chain.
Yeah.
I met up with him.
Is it Sunfresh? Does he run Sunfresh? Hold on. No. Sorry, I'm just guessing.
No, he doesn't run.
That I know.
He doesn't run Sunfresh is actually one of those like chains where like you will buy, what do they call it? Franchises.
Right. Yeah.
So it's all owned by different people.
All
so
right,
no, this guy doesn't own all of Sunfresh's, but maybe one of them. I don't know.
Right.
Anyhow, regardless, I met up with him maybe 2 months ago to go over some stuff with him. And I said, hey, you know, I was listening to Planet Money on NPR. Have you heard of this Planet Money? It's a podcast. Yeah. So Planet Money is a very cool podcast. They take economic issues, boil it down to about 15 minutes, and make it very layman. This one was about food waste in America. And they were talking about the food waste in school districts. And the food waste at grocery stores as well. And they said 30 to 40% of what is dropped off from a semi-truck at a grocery store might be turned away at the door. Just because it doesn't look good, or maybe it's got a dent in the can or whatever. And I told him, as I was sitting there, I guess I asked, I said, you know, on my way over, I was listening to this podcast. So is that true? You guys turn away 30, 40%? He says, yes, that's just how it goes. And I said, well, why don't you, and I'm sure you've already thought of this, but why don't you just donate it to like the schools? They're there. People complain about the low quality lunch food. Some people, why not just, and he says, Ryan, let me tell you why. And he says, and you probably already know where I'm going with this. He says, every time our milk section, every time the milk gets within a week of being expired, 2 days, within 2 days of being expired, we take it off the shelves. He says the milk's fine, but it's just, you know, policy for people to see, you know, good milk. And he says, I had an entire semi full of good milk, and I was trying to drive it just down the road to school district up north. Yeah. And he says, in order to do that, I had to get a city food and health inspector to be there and see it all. I had to get a city approved cooling semi truck, special ordered to go do it. Then he had to fill out paperwork. And then the biggest kicker was that the school, if say he donated $10,000 worth of milk, had to report that as income for the school, which would then be deducted from what the Department of Education gives them next year. Yeah. And I said, well, do you mean to say that every dollar for dollar donation has to be removed from what they get next year? He said, yeah. So the schools turn it away. Because although they do want that $10,000 worth of milk, that means $10,000 that can't be spent on anything else at school. Yeah. Frustrating. Super frustrating. And he owns quite a few grocery stores. He's like, I want to give all this stuff to the schools, but I'm not allowed to, or they won't take it because of what will happen. This is really cool what Pledge Sense is doing, because it sounds like they're kind of circumnavigating that little rule there. Yeah, and they have a lot of other benefits. So Donors Choose, for example, you have to use certain vendors, but Pledge Sense you can do whatever you want. I had one of my teacher friends use Pledge Sense to take her students to DC. Oh yeah, right here. Is it A Trip of a Lifetime with Stephanie Brain?
No, the trip was done last year, but donate to her. So, people, I would say, yeah. So, she took it to take the kids to DC. So she was just like, we need this much. And then, because it's just like essentially cash that goes to the school, right? She could use it to get plane tickets. She could use it to pay for the hotel, do those sorts of things. Whereas, in Donors Choose, if you have specific vendors that you have to go to, it's like there's like a lot of things, like, that's like an experience. It's not like I need a class set of highlighters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean, actually, because I've been on Donors Choose for a couple of years, and you see some people with some like very, very silly ideas.
Yeah.
And silly in the sense like, you're really going to ask for like $25,000 to buy all that. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Right,
there are some really, really good projects that I'll donate to, and then there are some who say, like, come on, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Did you anyhow?
Yeah.
No, but that's very cool. And so this was a Lean Lab cohort, and it's still up and running.
Yep.
Very cool.
It was last year. They were one of our top 2.
Oh, okay.
So they were in a couple of states when they got to us, and then afterwards, now I think they're in 48. I think they might be in all 48 or 50. Actually, I'll have to check their last newsletter.
Well, let's see. Let's see if it shows up here. Does it even? We won't spend too much time going through here. Where do you think it would show? Maybe about.
I have no idea.
Okay, $1.2 million raised for school. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know what I love about what the Donors Choose and now Pledge Sense is that you don't have to ask for. I'm sure there's some permission on what you can do, but it's direct. People say, be the change, be local, think globally, act locally, all that. Right here, folks. Like, if you want to get local and you really want to improve the schools and you're serious about it, it's clearly right here, and it's that easy for them. No, it doesn't say here how many, but we'll just say they're in all 50.
We'll say all 50.
And Puerto Rico.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Wow,
and Guam. And let's just go with all the protectorates too.
Yeah. Absolutely. East Timor. No, we're not going to talk about them anymore.
Yeah. No, but I think it's true. I think that this is sort of the challenge of the challenge of working in education, and I think this is why, in my why I try and work with as many community members as possible, because it is such a dense system, right? Like that story that you shared about trying to get milk to schools, like trying to get anything to schools is kind of like that. It's just very dense, and it's like, if I was talking to your friend who I would love to talk to, I would be like, okay, let's see if we can sit down. I'm like, let's see if we can sit down with like a principal who really wants this milk, right? And then like you, and then like someone else who kind of like really wants this milk, but they like know about all these regulations or whatever, and then be like, okay, how do we really problem solve this, right?
Yeah, I'll be happy to connect you if you think. Yeah. If you, I didn't pick up that football and run with it because I just don't know. But if you want to take a stab at it. I will definitely follow up with your friend later, because I can think of several teachers who would actually really want that milk for multiple reasons. But I think but that's what you have to do. You have to bring people together, and you have to you have to really problem solve it, because it's like the system is so dense, right? And it needs so much
complicated. Help. Yeah. And so you need to get like a coalition of 3 or 4 people kind of like to pull a knot apart, right? And I think that's one of the things that we really operate in. I mean, I have this belief that I think like teachers are inherently innovative anyway. Yeah. So most of our entrepreneurs are former teachers. And that's really easy for us to work with, because I think especially in under-resourced schools, teachers create something from nothing every single day, right? It's like when you don't have the money and you don't have the resources, but you still have like a child who'll show up and they need to like move up like 3 grade levels in reading, what are you going to do? And then you like do what entrepreneurs do every day, which is create something out of nothing.
Yeah, exactly. You get creative.
Go for it. Yeah.
So okay, now this has been an awesome conversation so far. I want to know more about what the next year or two looks like for you guys. Do you have any major under projects under construction right now that you're trying to put together?
Yeah.
Or like, are you trying to right now? You let 5 folks in. When also for people listening who may have a great next educational breakthrough, when do you accept applications for your next?
Yeah. So our application will open up again next year. We try and open it up sometime in like the late winter, early spring. Okay. And then we accept over early summer for then like a fellowship that runs like summer to fall.
Okay.
We haven't pinned down the dates yet. This year we just expanded from August to November. So like, I think we're going to run the same model next year.
Okay.
But that having been said, I don't care about the rhythm of programming. It's entrepreneurship is a long game. And so anyone who wants to talk to me at any time can reach out to me, and I will try and meet with them about their idea. Just because it is kind of a long game. I mean, there are people who I really want to apply for the fellowship for next year who I've been working with since last year.
Okay.
You know, because it's a large leap to like go from an idea to being able to take like a $35K grant, you know? Like there's a lot of work that happens in between there. And so
that's where you guys come in.
Yeah, that's where we come in. So, don't, you know, like whatever it may be, even if you want to apply next year, reach out to me now. Yeah. Is what I would say. So there's that. And my contact information is Aditya, ADITYA, at theleanlab.org, and you can see it on the website.
In fact, I'll visit it right now as you're talking so that folks watching can see.
Cool. And I would also say, what is exciting for us, right?
Yeah, what's coming down the pipeline?
I am really excited to like codify and like finish out this like first year of like community at every single step of the way process, right? From, you know, sourcing the problems to selecting our entrepreneurs to funding our entrepreneurs, right? To being our entrepreneurs, right? Like it's been sort of been like 4 years in the making to really get to this point, right? Like working within the community and doing all that sort of work. So I'm very excited to really run that, you know, next year for the second time. And also like the year after that for the third time. So there's a lot that's very exciting there. I also think, you know, there's so much that needs to be built out around that, you know, and we're really trying to support, more of an ecosystem as well. Right. So besides us just growing as an org, you know, internally, right. 'Cause we're currently 2 people, plus a Vista, there's a lot to really, you know, like to really try and like make sure that there's, you know, like an ecosystem of work to improve, you know, the system of schools, right? Like it doesn't take just us, right? Trying to like introduce, you know, like to build new businesses, right? We do need like people on the inside. We need people who maybe aren't building new businesses, but like, you know, like want to help out within the capacity that they already have, right? From outside of schools, and then other people from within. So really looking to partner much more strategically with local community organizers, local organizations, anyone who like literally just thinks about students, right, or kids and is affected by schools, but like doesn't really think that they have a place there, but like who, like, you know, working with them, working with neighborhood associations, right, like trying to like really, working more with government. So just trying to sort of build out a way in which we operate as part of a larger ecosystem is a big thing for us. You know, and honestly, the third thing that I really that kind of keeps me up at night is I really just want more KC community entrepreneurs. So we recruit nationally for the fellowship and we accept nationally, right?
Okay.
But we're heavily KC oriented, right? So even if even if you're coming in from out of town, you have to be willing to scale here as kind of a stipulation for you to be here. Okay. And also fair enough. You have to be solving a KC problem, like from what I like identified in that listening tour. But I just like freak out about my KC pipeline all the time. I'm sure like Katie, the founder of the Lean Lab, is just so tired of hearing me.
When you say freaking out, you mean like bringing new people in?
No, like just like there are a lot of good people here who have deep community knowledge, and I want them to be like our entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yes. That's what I want. And I just like, it just like keeps me up at night trying to be like, where do I find them? Like, you know, how do we develop them? Right. Yes. And it's like and that's really what I want. It's like, you know, I'm just like, are you like, you know, I'm like, are you a parent with an idea? Like, please come talk to me. Like, are you a teacher with an idea? Come talk to me, because I think you need, because I put great value in just like the deep knowledge of experience.
Well, you know what's refreshing is to see the excitement and the motivation that you personally have. You're sitting here, and clearly you've got the want and the excitement to like make the world of education and schooling better. And like we said earlier, I mean, it's not going to get better if we just sit here.
Yeah.
So if somebody has even just a small connection, an idea, something they can work out to make it.
Yeah.
You're like begging, like bring it, get in here. Let's sit here.
Talk to me.
Let's get you connected with everyone that you can connect them with in the city. Very cool.
Yeah, and I think my email's there. Where is it? Yes, email. There's
there
a
it
link.
is. Yes, it's on.
Please email me.
Yes. Oh shoot.
It's
Yep,
on the
it's right there. Exactly.
website. But yes,
You can't miss it. So, what are some other contemporaries or same type of folks in Kansas City that that are similar to Lean Lab? Are you guys working with anyone, doing any partnerships or anything like that to help expand?
That's interesting.
Your vision?
Our incubator partnerships. So like we're the only like education focused incubator in the city. There are other incubators in the city, like you were talking about Beta Blocks before. There's Sprint Accelerator, there's Techstars, right? But they focus in just different areas, right? So we're very education focused. Our partners are national, for within the work that we do. So like Village Capital is a social good incubator that operates globally. And then 4.0 Schools has been a really good partner with us as well. And they're out of New Orleans, and they do a more early stage, sort of idea stage education entrepreneurship work. And they're also very much into education. Our partners here, I would say like our solid partners, really like our school partners, like just school system leaders and school leaders who, just kind of support us and open their doors to us and allow our entrepreneurs to like enter their buildings and pilot with them and all that kinds of stuff. So, it's interesting because we're like the only person in Kansas City operating within our space. So our partnerships really do come from school leaders, so.
Well, hey, this has been a great time. We've been going at this for about an hour now. So let's wrap this up here. Yes. Folks, clearly, if you have any passion at all, you have any connections, and I'll definitely connect you with the guy that I know. But if you have any way that you can improve the lives and the education and everything about public or private schooling here in Kansas City, reach out. Any schools at all. Any way to increase the likelihood that the kids going to school here in Kansas City will be more successful. You have a resource sitting right here. You're listening to his voice. You're watching if you're watching.
Reach out. And homeschooling. And whatever.
Homeschooling.
I mean, just education. If you're a non-traditional educator. If you're
I'm glad you brought that up. So, what do you see about... Do you guys interact with homeschooling folks at all?
Not as much as I would like.
Homeschooling is having a large comeback. And like the last 10 or so years, it's had quite a large comeback. So I'm curious.
I would say like not as much as I would like. We have a couple of parents I know in our network who just say that they have homeschooled their parents and they work with us or come to us for just, ideas and just to connect with other people. Not as much as I would like. I mean, the real thing is like I would... to be very specific, it's like, homeschool is a big one. And then another one is people who work with students but just aren't in schools. So if you're someone who does an education program or a camp, if you run a camp, if you run
a softball team,
like if you provide any sort of, if you're like the zoo, it's like a very traditional, it's like, hi, we educate kids, but not at school. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
But there's so many like teeny local ones, right? If you run a historic site, if you do anything in STEM education, if you're like a corporation that like takes kids on field trips or like does things like that, or has like a pretty robust like K-12 like high school internship program or something, like literally like, you do educate children and help them out. So anyone like that even is something that I really want to connect to.
Okay. Yeah, everybody, one more time. If you have any connections, if you can make these kids' lives better and you have the ability to do so or connect that means to Aditya here, reach out to him. Go to theleanlab.org or reach out to me. I'll connect you. But I think that's all I've got right now.
Yeah.
I'm very happy you came on, said yes to this. Let's keep pushing this message and see if we can't improve how this thing works out as we go forward. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, that's it for right now,
great.
people. You betcha. I'm going to end it here, but everybody, thanks for watching. Take care. Good night. See ya. Nice.